for being with us. Thank you so much. I know this was last minute. It's so nice of you to do this.
Thank you. Thank you for such a schus, for such an honor to be joining together with truly such an incredibly inspiring group of women this morning. So thank you so much for this opportunity. I want to share with you some brief ideas to help us connect maybe to the Koach as we approach just a week away to Rosh Chodesh Nisan, as we are preparing for Pesach. And I want to start by talking about what it's like for me to be on Zoom at this moment. I don't know if some of you are just listening, so if you are, I'll describe it, but my bookshelves are half empty behind me. They're a little bit in disarray. And I want to tell you that I contemplated using one of these false Zoom backgrounds that you can have, right, where you have, I don't know, like the Golden Gate Bridge, or I'm at the beach. I contemplated seeing if there was another corner in my home that would look different. But the truth is that I'm in the middle of packing up my home to move, God willing. This is not what Pesach cleaning looks like for us. And as I was thinking about it, I realized that the essence of the message that I wanted to share with you this morning, and the avoda, the work that I'm doing in myself, lies in showing up and sharing, not without boundaries, but certainly in a very real way, what my life is looking and feeling like. And I think it really comes down to the question, as we live our lives, as we go through our personal struggles, and certainly as we spend the next few weeks, God willing, preparing for Pesach, whether our job is to keep our heads down, to put, so to speak, like the horse blinders on, especially when it comes to our Pesach preparations. And we all know the kind of anxiety that can get kicked up when we start comparing notes. Or really, are we meant to engage with the world around us while we are also scrubbing our cupboards and going through our lists? And my answer in how I'm showing up is that the opportunity is really in how we look up, and how we show up in our lives. And if we look in the Torah, if we look at a really key turning point in the story of the Yetziah, the Exodus of the Jewish people, I believe we actually find a clue into not just why, but how we do this. So if we look in Shmos, if we look at the really unfolding of Moshe's leadership, we notice something very interesting. And I understand you looked a little bit at this previously, and I'm hoping that the way that I share it will give us a little bit of a new angle here this morning. So we hear about Moshe growing up. And the Torah tells us that he goes out, v'yetzei el Echav, he goes out to his brethren, v'yar b'sivlotam, and he sees their burden. And Rashi here says something fascinating to me. If we look at the Rashi there, he explains, what is it that he saw their burden? Natan einav v'libo, liot meitzar alehem. He focused his eyes and heart to be distressed over them. And if we look at this Rashi, there is something to me that is paradigm shifting, because Rashi isn't just telling us about an emotional state that Moshe is in. I believe that he's not just describing to us a historical event, but I believe that Rashi is unpacking what Moshe did in an instructive, in a didactic kind of way for us as Jews. And that is as follows. If we look at what Moshe does in Rashi's explanation, there's an order of operations here. Rashi says that he trains his eyes. First he looks, and then his heart is awakened. And I think that there's something fundamental here for us, which is that which we look at is what will have an effect on our hearts. And that if we want to feel more connected to each other, if we want to feel a little bit less in our silos, then the first thing that we must do is to notice, where is my attention going? Is my attention running on my internal dialogue, my internal to-do list, my internal struggle? Or am I allowing myself to not just literally, but also metaphorically look up, to focus first my eyes, and then my heart will be awakened? Now, one of my favorite pastimes is finding where Torah wisdom is showing up in the current research. And there is fascinating research by a group of neuroscientists led by researcher Giacomo Rizzolatti. I always love getting to say that name. So Rizzolatti and his team discovered something called mirror neurons. So if you're familiar with mirror neurons, just follow along for a moment. I'm going to try to do some basic neuroscience 101. So basically what we have is in our brain, different cortexes, areas of the brain that are responsible for different functions. one of our cortexes is called the motor cortex. So the motor cortex is responsible for action, for motor movements. Now, when I move my arm, what will happen is that a part of my motor cortex, the motor neurons responsible for my arm moving, will light up. This makes sense, right? If you move your arm right now, the same thing will happen for you. But what Rizzolatti and his team discovered was something, I believe, paradigm shifting. You see, when you watch me move my arm right now in real time, if you're watching, or if you're watching someone else, you can try this. There is a corresponding subset of motor neurons that fire when you just see me move my arm, meaning your arm was still, but your motor neurons, a subset of those neurons that would be responsible for you moving your arm, mirror my movements in your brain. It gets even better. It's not just true when it comes to motor neurons, to those which allow us to move. It's also true when it comes to sensory neurons. You see, there is another set of neurons, of messengers in our brain, in our cortex, that is responsible for interpreting and communicating touch. So similarly, when my hand is touched, there is a whole neuron party happening right now in my brain saying her hand's being touched. Similarly for you, watching my hand being touched, completely still and perhaps untouched as you're watching this, there's a subset of sensory neurons that are firing away. Literally, your brain is feeling what I'm feeling. Now, if we think back to this Rashi is telling us about motor neurons. He's saying that the things that we look at are the things that will be activated within us. And if we want to feel less isolated, if we want to tap in to the core of feeling more connected, it begins with what we look at. Now here's the thing. These motor neurons are communicating whether we like them to or not. So whether we're feeling in the mood or not, simply by where we are focusing ourselves, by where we are training our attention, we are activating a whole empathy neurosystem. And the scientists actually dubbed these neurons empathy neurons, which means that we are literally wired at a neurological level to be connected to each other. If you are frustrated and I am allowing myself to see what you are feeling, then my neurological activity is feeling that frustration with you. If you are in pain, then I can feel a little bit of it with you, whether I'm aware of it or not. Now, this, I think, has very interesting implications for us as Jews, and particularly at this time of year. You see, the Mishnah in Avos, when the Mishnah talks about the ways that we can be Kona Torah, one of the ways is to be noseh, to carry the ol, to carry the burden with our friends. And I always think it's interesting to notice that Chazal, our sages there, are telling us that the root is not to fix our friend's burden. I'm sure, like you, or you, like me, have had the experience of someone suffering and wishing we could fix it for them. And knowing that we can't, perhaps it's unfixable, perhaps we ourselves are overwhelmed in this moment and unable to be there in the way that we wish we could. And perhaps the story in our head is that what we ought to do is make it all better, because that's what we like to do. And we wish it could be made better for us as well. But the Mishnah there is telling us something very powerful about what is really necessary in life. And that is the capacity to be with someone in their struggle, not to carry it for them. It doesn't say carry your friend's burden for them, give them a day off so they can put their feet up. It says go and be with your friend in such a way that he or she feels no longer alone, feels understood in that place of struggle. Will the struggle go on? Probably. Can you fix it with a magic wand? Not yet. I always tell my clients, I'm waiting for my magic wand from Amazon Prime. It hasn't arrived yet, but I can be with you in this. Brene Brown, an empathy researcher, talks about the difference between empathy and sympathy. And she uses this visual of a pit. She says, sympathy is when we see someone in a struggle at the bottom of a pit and we peer down and we stay where we are. And we're like, oh, hey, hope it's going okay down there. That must be hard. Empathy, she says, is the ability to climb into that pit, to sit with our friends where they are and to say, this is hard. This darkness, I know what this darkness is like. And just to be with that. Now, the risk is that we have to feel some discomfort because we typically don't like to feel the darkness. We don't like to even connect to that place of struggle within ourselves. We want to choose simcha, we want to choose joy. And I'm not suggesting that we want to become bogged down, mired in depression and hopelessness. Lahefech, the opposite. You see, Moshe, when he feels what his brethren are experiencing, mobilizes. When we are able to tap into that place inside of ourselves, then we can come together in such a way that we are no longer passive in our lives and the lives of those around us, but we feel our capacity, if not to fix, certainly to carry with, to be with. As Jews, we know this, the halachos, the laws that tell us how to be with a mourner, similarly tell us that when we go to make a shiva call, we don't fix things, right? We don't give words of nechama until the mourner, until the avel speaks first to us. What are we communicating? I can be present with you wherever you are. So we're in the few weeks leading up to Pesach. And we know that Pesach is about the ultimate redemption. It's about tapping into the koach, the energy that comes at this time of year, and God willing will lead to the ultimate redemption. And we know that it was in the schus and the merit of the Nashim Tzidkanios, the righteous women, and I'm certain that many of them are inspiring me here this morning, that the geula will ultimately come. So how do we get ready? So I want to say that one of the ways that we get ready is not by just keeping our heads down in our cupboards, in our lists, in our families, which no doubt are immense and tremendous responsibilities and important responsibilities. But that likewise, this is a time to look up, not because we necessarily have the bandwidth to be running all over and doing everything, but simply so that we can be present with the people around us. So what does that look like? When we speak to someone, I don't know, where you are and how you are in Toronto, we're like still in semi-lockdown. So maybe it's just when we're having a phone conversation or you're seeing someone in a lineup, taking a moment, taking that breath inside to ask really how they are, and then really listening and hearing it, training our eyes, our emotional self, so that we can connect to the other. Because by feeling where we are all being squeezed, because let's be honest, we are being squeezed. And this is the time of year, and certainly this year, we are all being uniquely squeezed, some more than others. But to really feel it, to feel it with each other in such a way that on the other side of that will be the geula. So that we won't live in this disparate, disconnected way where I'm doing my thing and you're doing your thing, but where we open up a little. I showed you my shelves. Obviously, this is not, large scale suffering, but it's a small kernel of an expression of how we can let each other into our lives. And in so doing, we join together. Those empathy neurons literally have no boundaries. They can travel across oceans. They can travel across rooms. They are communicating to each other. All we need to do is look up. So I want to leave you with a story that my bubi always told me. So I should tell you, my bubi, Aleha Shalom, a blessed memory, was a Holocaust survivor. Before the war in Lodz, Poland, she lost her mother as a 5-year-old girl. The war broke out in her early 20s. She lost her family. She lost her beloved father. She endured the camps. She miraculously survived. And she always told us, how she came to Canada without a word of English, without a penny in her pocket, and how she and my Zaidi built a life here. I share her background to say that she, if anyone, had the right to complain, to feel down, to look down, to feel like, okay, I got my family and let me survive here. And she always told us that rather than sitting in front of a mirror where we would only see ourselves, we should sit by a window. Because by a window, you might see a poor person. You might see an elderly person. You might see a lonely person. And then you would be able to go out and be with them. I believe what my bubi was telling us what Rashi was unpacking for us, what mirror neurons have revealed for us, is that we are all deeply connected, that wherever we are, we may not have the magic wands, but we have the koach, the power to connect to each other. And in so doing, God willing, to bring the ultimate geula. Thank you for the beautiful opportunity to be with this incredibly powerful group of women this morning. I wish you all incredible bracha, incredible koach, and may we all be deeply connected. Thank you.
Wow, Ilana, that was unbelievable. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Really unbelievable. Thank you. Wow. Does anybody have questions? Would you mind taking questions, Ilana?
Sure. Yeah.
Does anybody have questions for Ilana? It was so beautiful. Wow. Anybody want to ask Ilana anything?
Sure.
Go ahead, Rita.
Good morning.
Wonderful.
Wonderful presentation. I just wanted to know, how do you deal with when you have a lot of friends or you know a lot of people? How do you go into their space and try and be with them? Doesn't that have an effect on you? Shouldn't you have a certain type of barrier? Because if you're either a visitor of a hospital or older people or people in distress, how do you create that barrier that you don't go down with them, that you can actually lift them up? And listening to me is the best thing I can do for them. So if you have any advice about that.
So I think you're asking the question of how do we have boundaries and also be givers? Is this the question? So I think this is like the penultimate question, particularly as women, as Jewish women, right, that we all struggle with. I think first, it's very personal. There are different times someone just asked, okay, there are things in the chat. I get distracted by it. Okay, in a moment, I'm gonna answer the chat. So there are different times that we have different bandwidth for different things. And so, at different stages of life, first of all, we'll be able to show up more for the people around us than we can at other stages of life. And so part of the work, the constant avoda, is to be able to be taking honest self-assessments. And there are different ways that we can do this, whether it's with a chavrusa, if you have a teacher, if you are part of some kind of organized vad where you are tracking and you can really get a spiritual temperature taker of where you are at and what your bandwidth is at. So if we're talking, if this is kind of moving into the concept around chesed, we always start with ourselves and then our family and then people external to us. But that's why I wanted to talk about carrying the burdens with, not fixing, right? So it's not necessarily like that I can run and make meals for people right now, although I would like to, and there are people who need them. But maybe I can tell them I'm davening for them, or I can just daven for them. I can add their name to my Tehillim list. Maybe that's the maximum that I can do right now. So part of it is really gauging for ourselves, and that's what keeps us healthy. And then, I'll add one other thing that as a therapist, a strategy that I use, which is based on, if you want to look more into this, something called IFS, internal family systems, that what part of our work is to notice when we get activated inside and we start to feel like I need to do more, and just being able to hear that voice and calm that internal voice and remind ourselves, I'll tell you what I say to myself is I am still present inside of me. I am still me here. And then, I heard you say the best thing you can do is listen, and 100%, right? The empathy is not, let me problem solve this. We all know what it's like to be in an emotionally painful place and have someone try to fix it. And all we wanted was for them to be with us and hear it. And the more we can be inside of ourselves, the more we can make space for the other. So that's, I guess, a couple of on one foot strategies or tools to have some boundaries. So really checking in with ourselves in a larger way, kind of to understand. And then also to be able to, while we're with someone, remind ourselves, I'm present inside of me. And anytime we feel that we're not okay or safe inside, we're not going to actually be able to be there for the other person healthily. So knowing how to take that step back. I hope that sort of gives you a little bit of a tip of the iceberg of a very big, probably lifelong question for many of us.
Right, thank you.
Thank you. So there were requests for the name of my book. So I haven't packed it up yet. So my book, thank you for asking, is Choosing Up, Elevating the Everyday. And you can find it on Amazon. You can find it at Mosaica Press. It's a Mosaica Press book. And thank you so much.
Wow, beautiful, Ilana. Thank you so much. It was really beautiful. Anybody else? Oh, it was really, I'm gonna go out and get that book.
Hi, I'm just talking on video because I'm actually taking a walk outside. And this is Rhonda from Toronto.
Hi.
I just thought, hi, it was brilliant what you said, first of all. I love how you compartmentalized it. And the only reason I'm speaking up is because I am a nurse and I haven't worked in the hospitals for a long time, but I had to work really hard on that point. How do I not take home people's pain? It's been a lifelong journey and something that I'm still always working on. And I have a lot to say about it, Rita, if you want to come and talk to me, but I know that when we learned in my massage courses, you always had to stop and ground yourself before in some way, whatever's meaningful to you. And we used water a lot, which for me is so connected to our tradition of using water for Netilat Yadayim, for the whole thing. I don't have to tell everybody the mikvah. So the water almost to me brings us back to a state of neutral. I mean, we think about how our ancestors, our mothers might have put the fork in the earth. And, if we study Talmud, we understand where that came from. My mother did it. I never understood where that came from. But the idea was bringing things back to neutral. And water sort of does the same thing, so we kind of wash away, we ground, we don't take on other people's stuff and we clear ourselves. So that's what I do whenever I've done treatments on people. But it is very hard. And I want to say, we also have to be really kind to ourselves, because I think the biggest piece is that we have to remember in this generation that sadly, the generational transference from our mothers, got blocked for most of us, and what you were saying, you're the grandchild, I think, of survivors and a survivor, the story about early loss of mother so we're just trying a few generations later, we're trying to correct it. We're trying to heal. And I think what's exactly what we're doing right now. So the biggest piece, I think sometimes I like what you said, there are different times in our lives. Women do things, consecutively, not simultaneously. So there were times that I really wanted to reach out and cook meals for people, but I was too busy with my own things. And that's why it is a mitzvah to receive and for all of us to connect on different levels at different ages. And, God willing, there'll be a time when I'm older that I can bring the food to the mothers who need it. And we all have to help each other. But it is a really, really important point, because I think we can't live in isolation. We have to be out in the world. We have to lift up, like you said, and the water part of it, Netilat Yadayim. When we do Netilat Yadayim, every single week, I actually meditate on that moment as I look at my hands and I say, what am I going to do with my hands? And Netilat Litol Yadayim is to lift up our hands. So for me, that's sort of the mindfulness moment whenever I need to kind of ground myself. And, we have a lot of the tools. We're just really, really hard in our generations because, the mothers didn't naturally pass it down. But here we are. It's like a miracle even right now that we're sharing and passing it down to each other. So Shavua Tov, I hope that spoke a little bit to what you said. But Ilana, what you're doing and breaking it down to help people and understand it is amazing. Yesha koach, Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov, that was so beautiful. Such a beautiful, wise addition. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilana. Thank you so much. Really, thank you so much. I hope you'll come back and speak again. It was amazing.
Be my pleasure.
Thank you, and good luck on that move.
Thank you.
Good luck on the packing, not easy.
You see the other side of the camera. That part I'm not letting you see.
Okay, thank you so much for that.
Be well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ilana.
There's some things that need to remain hidden.
Exactly. With boundaries, right? We said with boundaries, Sherry. Bye. Thank you so much.
Sherry, you want to do a gratitude moment before we get off? I want to
Sure.
ask somebody who wants a gratitude moment here.
Yeah, if someone wants to do it, just mention it in the chat and we'll call on you. Otherwise, I can do it very easily. I know all of us can because we're that type of group. Okay, so I
Wait,
don't see anybody.
I will say something because I just spoke, but I'm
Perfect.
grateful to Kadosh Baruch Hu that my son was able to get here and cross all obstacles.